I've been working as a food delivery driver for about 8 months now, and with how my contract works, I need at least 3 evening shifts, with 2 of those being between Friday and Sunday. I don't really mind working in the evenings since it has a nice vibe to it, being really calm, just throw on some headphones and a good playlist or a podcast and, well, you're good. Plus, I never really work for more than like 4.5 hours on end since I work on an e-bike, so I don't do longer shifts without my battery dying, keeping in mind the bike needs to be taken home as well. Apart from some stupid encounters that I've had with teenagers trying to be funny in front of their friends, like biking after me and asking for food or pretending to be the customer, I've never really had anything creepy happen to me. It was, until a few weeks ago. So, it was a Thursday evening and I had a shift from 5:30 till 9:30. Where I live, us delivery drivers get paid per hour instead of per delivery. This does have its advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages being that we can't decline orders on our own end. If we, for whatever reason, cannot take an order, we need to talk with the company that we work for. So whatever trip is thrown at us, we pretty much have to take it. Up until this point, I've been having a good day, close by deliveries from nice local restaurants. None of the journeys were too far away places, which was good. The weather was fine as well, although a little bit chilly, but if you layer yourself well enough, then it's not as bad as long as it doesn't rain, I suppose, which luckily it wasn't. It was around 8:15 when I got a McDonald's order. The customer lived around 12 minutes away from the restaurant, which wasn't ideal, but it was fine since I'd only lost 1 strap of battery so far. The location it was going to was also a good one, since the only time that I need to get off the bike lane was to cross some roads. Other than that, it was all bike lanes pretty much the whole way. So I picked up the order after waiting for around 15 minutes. I got onto my bike, chose a playlist, and made my way over to this customer. The streets were pretty quiet, setting the vibe. As I got closer to the customer's house, I made my way onto the sidewalk and cycled slowly, trying to find the house number, which can be a bit of a pain at night. I eventually did though, and I locked my bike up. I walked over to the door and knocked. After a few seconds, I heard commotion and I placed my bag down, taking out the food. The door opened and a lady greeted me with a smile. After handing her the food and telling her to enjoy, she thanked me, and after giving me a tip, she closed the door back up and I got back onto my bike and unlocked it. I had been charging my phone with my power bank, but wanted to take the charger off since my phone was now full enough. And dealing with a wire sticking out of my jacket pocket can be a bit of a hassle when taking off and putting back on my backpack. However, I always feel a bit awkward and watched staying in the front yard of people for too long, especially when they have those doorbell cameras, so I made my way over to a small alleyway close to the house. As I turned back off my bike, I took my power bank to turn it off, and then I changed my playlist, and as I was putting the power bank back into my pocket, I heard slow footsteps creeping closer to me from behind. Now, this alleyway that I was standing in was pretty narrow and small, so I was probably blocking it. I quickly moved and got off my bike, holding it close to me as I pressed myself onto the wall. I excused myself and made a gesture for the person to pass. But instead of thanking me and walking on, the person just sort of kept standing there. This is when I looked up. I was met with a tall, skinny lady standing just a few inches away now. Her face was slim and her long hair came to rest on her shoulders. Her face looked white and honestly, she looked like a heroin addict or something. She looked me dead in the eyes without any expression and was breathing through her mouth. She was wearing brown jeans and a blue hoodie with the hoodie on. Can I help you?" I asked after painful moments of silence. She looked at me for a few seconds and said, "You have my food." I froze. Now, in our app system, there is no way to actually confirm that the customer was the right one since we don't have any security codes to ask. Since I was busy with my power bank, I hadn't clicked finish order yet. I checked my phone and decided to ask the lady questions about the order. I think another driver might have your food. I just delivered to somebody else," I said with a smile. "Where did you order from?" If she was right, I would have been able to easily help her get a refund. However, she just sort of stared at me, her expressionless face turning into a hard, ugly glare. "No," she said loudly, "that was my food," she stated. Again, I tried to reason with her, asking her for her name and what food she had ordered. "I'm just trying to help you, ma'am. Check your app. The app should tell you how far the driver is." To this, she stepped back and pointed her hand at me. "My food. I need my food." At this point, I figured that she must be homeless and hungry or something. "I have some food if you want it," I said. Now, I always keep snacks on me in case I have to wait long for an order to get ready or have no orders to come in for a bit. We do wait a lot since we cannot turn down orders for taking too long to be made. My go-to work snacks are protein granola bars. They're easy to keep since they don't take up much space and you can eat them fast. I decided to give her a box and maybe she would be satisfied. I took one out of my backpack and I handed it to her. She took it from me, damn near snatching it out of my grip, and stepped closer. "I want my food," she stated sternly, her glare sharp. I let out a breath, getting really creeped out now, and once again asked her to check her app or give me her name, the name that she put up with her so-called order. She took a big breath, and before I could say anything, she exhaled and screamed bloody murder, making me flinch and press myself onto the wall. In the process, I accidentally moved my bike's throttle. This thing alone doesn't get past around 4 kilometers per hour. I had some struggle, but eventually got on the bike and pedaled away, and the lady still screaming behind me. I got to a fence that prevented cars from coming in and had to slow down a bit. And this was enough time for the lady to catch up and even grab onto the back of my bike. I let out a yelp as I could feel her try to push me back. I also heard something scrape the wall next to me. I didn't want to look and instead put my bike into a higher assist mode, which I normally never do and always keep on 2 to 3 to spare battery life, pedaling like my life depended on it as I got past the fences. I then put it even higher and finally I cycled away. I could hear the lady yelling and calling me a food thief and all this, and as I glanced back, she held the box of granola bars above her head and threw them at me. They landed about a meter away from me. I also noticed what was causing that scraping noise, as she was holding a knife in her hand. I focused back on the road and cycled away, hearing the lady still screaming, yelling, and trying to run after me. Eventually, I went back to the app and finally was able to click finish order, hoping to get a new one since I didn't want to aimlessly cycle around in fear of running into her since I thought that she might know all the shortcuts. I got a new order from a kebab place nearby, around 8 minutes away. This place was one that I got sent to a lot and the owner was very friendly, always asking us drivers if we wanted something to eat or to drink and saying that it was on the house. I got there and was slightly out of breath, and he asked me instantly what had happened and gave me some water to drink and helped me calm down a bit, and then gave me some food. After I told him, he talked to the company, saying that I was in no state to keep doing deliveries that night. My work agreed to allow me to end my shift earlier than normal. One of my co-workers came for the pickup, and since this delivery was just outside of city center, I biked back with him to the city center where it was still busy, and just went on home after that. I'm very glad for the timing of that order, to be honest, my co-worker and for the owner of the kebab store, and I really don't like to think about what that lady would have done if she had successfully pulled me off of my bike that night. This happened only last night, so it is still very fresh in my mind. I've been a caretaker in Scotland of a ridiculously large church, sanctuary, and 3 townhouses for the past 4 years. My job is to look after the various offices and function rooms of the 3 townhouses, manse, and church. These buildings, they're 4 stories high and built in 1710. I also look after the church and the sanctuary that are attached to the townhouses. It's a very large building attached to the other large buildings, and overall it's pretty overwhelming. Anyway, I start my evenings in there at around 6:30. I often don't switch on all the lights and have never felt threatened or creeped out carrying out my duties. Last night, however, I felt like an intense feeling of impending doom. I don't know how to describe it better than that, but I told myself that I was being ridiculous and tried to push the feeling to the back of my mind. At about 8 o'clock, I was in one of the charity creches, which is actually a really nice part of the building. Not spooky at all, and I suddenly heard a man say my name. I looked around, but I was the only one there, so I dismissed it. Later, I was walking through the bridge between the townhouses and the church and heard footsteps behind me. I looked and saw no one, but the hair stuck up on the back of my neck again, and I tried to dismiss it, a little more difficult this time. Walking out of the bridge and into the outer sanctuary, I looked into the glass partition to the inner sanctuary, and I swear to you that I saw someone. I got a fright, and I went in to see who it was, but again, no one. Then I heard a door slam up in the upper gallery. We have a choir room off the upper gallery, so I headed on up, saw no one, and tried to open the choir room and found it to be locked. I've never known it to be locked. I opened it with the master key and saw nothing except a few chairs and books, but smelled a really bad smell, like bad breath or something. I quickly closed it up and locked it again. At this point, I was more than uneasy. My last port of call at 10:30 was the crypt. I headed down the spiral stair into the crypt, which runs the entire underbuild of the property, and also slightly under the main road outside. Hard to explain, but I cleaned up, and as I was moving down the corridor, I heard footsteps again. I looked around. No one. There's only one entrance and exit in the crypt, so I was certain that I was alone. I quickly put my stuff away, did my final security sweep of the building, and locked up for the night. I had never felt so relieved to get out of that building before, though. I normally love my job there, but quite honestly, I'm a bit apprehensive of having to go to work tonight. When I was little, my mum would always tell me that there are ghosts that stay near the windows, waiting for a child to come closer so that they could push the child off. I did believe it for a while. I mean, I was just a kid. But later I thought that it was just a way for my mum to keep me from going near the open windows. I mean, it made sense. Open windows were obviously dangerous for a little kid. Now, when I was around 7, we lived in this house which had another house in front of mine. The houses weren't separated by a street, but by a small little field, concrete, not grass. The family in front also had a daughter, around 2 to 3 years younger than I was. However, we never really interacted with each other, nor did I know her. Mind you, this was during the time when I had come to the conclusion that my mum's window's ghosts were not real. I was sitting by the window looking outside when I saw the little girl sitting by the window as well. She had noticed me as she was looking down. Apparently, she was waiting for her dad to come home from work. There was no one around her, and as I was looking, I suddenly noticed something move behind her. It wasn't very visible as the lights weren't on, but that was quite normal considering that it was around 4 p.m. and the sun was still out. But this is when I noticed that there was a shadow behind her, a man specifically. I barely had any time to register what I had actually seen before the girl literally falls out of the window onto this little space right below her building. It was covered by another wall, so I couldn't see what had happened. The girl was eventually rushed to the hospital, though. She had only broken one of her legs and her nose, and if I remember correctly, her face had been a little bit mangled due to the height that she fell from, but all in all, she was okay and she survived. But let me tell you that seeing that shadow figure scared me so much that I stopped altogether going near any window if it was open. I don't know what happened to the girl later or where she is now, but I will never forget the shadow that was behind her that day, and how she fell straight out of that window upon seeing it. This happened a few years ago, and I've never told anyone about it. At the time, I lived pretty far out in the country, just me and my dog, no close neighbors, and it was usually really quiet. I liked it that way. One night, though, I woke up in the middle of the night to the motion sensor light going off outside. At first, I thought that it was just an animal, maybe a deer or something. But when I looked out of the window, I saw a man standing at the end of my driveway. He wasn't moving, just standing there facing my house. I don't know why, but I sort of froze. I just stood there staring at him and didn't move at all. The light went off after a while and everything went back to dark and quiet. I didn't sleep much after that though, and the next night it happened again. The lights came on and there he was. Same spot, same stillness, just standing there staring at the house. By this point, I was starting to get really freaked out, so I called the sheriff's department and they sent someone out to check it out, but by the time that they got there, he was already gone. The deputy told me that it was probably just some drunk guy or someone passing through and that I shouldn't worry unless he started coming closer. That didn't make me feel any better though, but I tried to move on. This went on for about a week though. Every night, like clockwork, I'd wake up and see him standing there at the end of the driveway. It was always the same too. He never moved, never said anything, just stood there staring at my house. It got to the point where I started closing the blinds at night, but I still felt like I could feel him out there. And then, just like that, so randomly, it stopped. I never saw him again after that week. No explanation, no reason, it just ended. I've never told anyone this before, but it's probably not a big deal. It's just something that stuck with me, and I just thought that I should share it because it is a little bit creepy, right? This happened to me when I was around 13 or 14, so about 14 years ago. We had moved into this house when I was about 6 and I never liked it. I just could never settle in it. I would actually for months when we first moved in, put myself to sleep by repeating there's no such thing as monsters. 2 years later, my little brother was born, and when he was around 3 to 4, he moved into my old room and I got the bigger room. He would always wake up screaming, saying that there was a man in the corner of his room trying to light it on fire. We could only ever get him to settle back to sleep if we put on Fireman Sam, the kids' show. Even when he slept in my mum's room, we'd have these episodes of waking up saying someone's in the corner and there's bugs crawling all over the ground. Really creepy stuff, but we thought maybe a bit of a night terror thing or imagination. Anyway, fast forward another 5 or 6 years, I was having breakfast and my mum tells me that she had such a strange experience the night before and that she was so scared that she was going to come and sleep with me. She said that she was asleep but woke up to the sound of someone breathing in her ear. Now, in her sleepy haze for a few seconds, she thought that it was my brother, but then remembered that he was at his dad's. She jumped up and turned the light on, but nobody was there. So I went to school and came home to her burning sage in her room and her room only. I was like, wouldn't you sage the whole house, yeah? But she only had a little bit left and was going to get some more tomorrow. I didn't think much of it and didn't really believe her story either, to be honest. Until the next morning when I was off sick from school, tonsillitis, and mum had gone to work. I was happily sitting in my bed playing some Sims when I felt it. Almost a bubble feeling around my head, kind of, like when you're underwater maybe. And then I heard it, this really breathy breathing in my right ear. The one that, if someone was standing beside me, that'd be the ear that they would be breathing in. Now, it wasn't a scary breathing, it was just big, deep breaths, and while I didn't feel threatened, safe to say that I legged it downstairs and I didn't go back up. I rang my mum and told her and stayed downstairs all day until she came home. The woman, though, she forgot the sage. At the time, I thought that was honestly a huge mistake, and I was like, sure, I'll just get murdered. Thanks, Mum. Anyway, I went to bed and nothing happened, but the next morning, same setup. I was happily playing Sims, and it happened again. I remember that I just put my hands up and said, okay, I'm going downstairs. But this time I made sure to take my laptop with me to continue playing The Sims, of course. My mum came home that day with Sage and did the whole house. And after that, it didn't happen again, but a few weeks later, my nan bought me a special heat-resistant mug for drinking green tea from. That was our thing at the time. And my mum and me were standing in the kitchen, talking and just making some tea. And I said, as I was pouring the water into my new cup to make the tea, "Hey, I think the ghosts are gone." And when I say that I hadn't even put more than a drop of water in, it was barely a splash, and the whole glass just shattered suddenly into a million tiny pieces. My mum and me just sort of looked at each other and laughed and said, "Well, I guess not then." But yeah, that's my story, and nothing else ever happened after that, thankfully. We moved a couple of years later, and then my lovely mum then one day told me, "Oh yeah, when I was younger that house was boarded up and a group of us broke in and did a Ouija board and things started moving around the place, so we ran and we never went back in it again." Good one, Mum, for opening a portal to the spirit world and having us all move in 15 years later, right? So yeah, that's my only paranormal experience, and honestly, hopefully, the last one that I'll ever have. So, I know that this is going to sound a bit weird, but I think that I saw an alien once during the 88 to 89 school year, 3rd grade for me, actually in my school. I had never seen any depictions of greys at that point. I was at school for an after-school art class in the cafeteria at Julius Marx Elementary School, and left the cafeteria to go to the bathroom at some point. I turned a corner to go to the bathroom and felt like someone was watching me, so I turned and looked. And standing in the doorway of the class next door to mine, silhouetted against the light, was someone not human-shaped. They were no more than 4 feet tall, very skinny, with a disproportionately large egg-shaped head, and they had long, thin arms and legs for their size, like a child but not proportioned like a human. Now, I was a brave kid then, especially when I was on my own and didn't have to look out for somebody else. I didn't scare easy, but the whole thing just felt so wrong, so, for a lack of a better term, alien, that I was terrified. I dashed into the bathroom. I must have used the facilities because I was never one to wet myself and I didn't need to go anymore. The weird thing, though, is that I don't remember anything about when I was in that bathroom. I don't know how I got back to the cafeteria. I cannot remember, although I remember being very afraid and peeking out and there was nothing there. I must have run back to the cafeteria, though, and told everyone what I had just experienced. That's when I learned about aliens and what they were supposed to look like. One of the other kids drew a picture, and quite honestly, I'm kind of freaked out that I can remember everything clearly, all this detail, except what happened in between running for the bathroom and running through the cafeteria door, other than a quick glance to see if it was there, obviously. I didn't get the impression that I was gone very long, like not even as long as I must have been gone, at least a full 10 minutes, I suppose. On the few occasions I have shared this story over the years, I've only ever gotten one of 2 reactions: total disbelief and the assurance that I was just imagining something that I'd seen on TV or read about, or total belief in the assurance that I was abducted that day and they must have erased my memory of it. All I can say is that I know for sure that I had never been exposed to any images of greys until that day after my experience. Until that moment, I thought of aliens as being fairly cartoonish in their appearance, and green. Remember that I was only 8 at the time, and it was the 1980s, right before the image of greys became commonplace in US culture. Also, although I cannot remember a lot now, I'm fairly certain that I could remember more until the past 10 years or so, because I had a good sense of how much time had passed, for one. And well, that's enough for me to be fairly certain that I'm not missing time and never was in regards to this incident. Also, I have never had another encounter, have never had any further signs of possible abduction, and have never even seen a UFO. Anyway, that's my once-in-a-lifetime weird alien encounter story. I do have some other stories of other paranormal experiences, and it's why I always try to be skeptical. Maybe I'll share some of those another time, but in any case, have a great evening, everyone, and stay safe. When I was young, I saw something really strange. So I was running late for high school and took a path that I had taken hundreds of times. It's just a street that ends on the side of a park that is surrounded by a wall. It's like a big T-top, part being the wall, and you can either turn left or right. Now, walking just ahead of me, there was a man with short hair and a backpack. Instead of turning left or right, he just sort of walked towards the wall. The wall's about 7 feet tall on the side of the road, but just about 2 feet tall on the other side, so you can easily see from the roadside people walking into the park, the benches, etc. But the weirdest thing is that this guy didn't walk through the wall. It looked like he was still walking, like one of those things you see in video games where a character is sort of stuck against a wall and starts walking just a few feet above the ground. But then, he just completely vanished. Obviously, I was shocked. I ran towards the wall and looked around, but there was no trace of him. I wasn't high enough to look clearly into the park, so I just assumed that I must have been tired and he just climbed the wall weirdly or something. Well, a few years later, I was in the area again, and I noticed the same guy walking just in front of me. Different outfit, but same bag, same haircut, and I don't know, I just knew that it was him, so I followed him to that same place, and the same thing happened again. I nearly lost it at this stage. It took me a few seconds to compose myself, and I ran to the wall. I was not able to jump to the other side, but I was able to grab the edge and take a bit of a look, and he was not there, anywhere. And there was really nowhere to hide or anything, just grass and some thin trees and a bench. The thing about the guy is that both times I saw him, I noticed that he knew where he was going, so I ran towards the park entrance that was maybe about 40 yards away and went into the same direction, trying to intercept him. On the other side, there was this big plaza, again nowhere to hide, and strangely at that hour it was nearly empty. There was no trace of him, not by the road, not at the end of the street. I mean, he was wearing a very particular outfit, very easy to spot, but he was just gone. For years, I haven't been able to sleep well, because whenever I start closing my eyes, I see just for a few moments many stretched out black humanoid shadows all around my room. Then I wake up and this keeps happening over and over until I finally pass out and sleep for a couple of hours. It always comes with a sensation in my chest or inside of me that's hard to explain, like a mix between pain and a sort of wish sound or a force inside of my body, warning me that this is about to happen and that I need to stay awake, even if I haven't slept before, if I don't want to suffer the consequences, that is. Whenever I try to ignore this feeling, stronger and worse things happen too. I've crossed that line 3 times and they were so intense that I don't ever want to experience it again. That's why I almost never sleep now. I started sleeping facing the wall, fully covered up to my head so that I couldn't see anything, and that worked for a while. Until one night, I felt a large hand with long nails, very cold, slowly touching me from the top of my head down to my back, and then it disappeared. I was horrified, counted to 3, jumped up, turned on all the lights, checked the whole room, and there was nothing. The strange thing though is that I sleep on just a mattress, so there's really nowhere under the bed for anyone to hide, which means that I don't really know where that hand came from. The second time I was lying on my back with my arms crossed, and for just a millisecond as I woke up, I saw a black humanoid figure squatting on my chest, staring directly at me. It didn't have eyes, but I knew that it was looking at me because its whole body was bent forward toward me. And the third time just happened this morning. Again, I was lying on my back. I try to sleep on my side so that this doesn't happen, but somehow I always end up turning onto my back while I sleep. I felt a weight on my bed like somebody sat down, and then my blanket was slowly pulled off of my face, gently, as if somebody was uncovering me in a kind and careful way. Then I felt a kiss on my cheek near my neck. At first, I thought it was my mother. I mean, she used to wake me up like that when I was a kid. But suddenly, that kiss turned into like a suction, like a hickey, so strong that I immediately stopped thinking that it was her. It hurt so much that I had to count to 3 to force myself up, even though my body was still half asleep. I stayed alert, looking around. Then I heard my mum on the rooftop, and I realized that it hadn't been her at all. All of this happened because I ignored the warning feeling in my chest that I mentioned earlier, the one that tells me that you have to stop sleeping now, like a sign that if I don't, things like this will happen. I looked online and the closest thing that I could find was exploding head syndrome, but that doesn't explain the other stuff that happens to me. Like one time, I searched tutorials on how to fall asleep. There was a military method about holding your breath and relaxing to sleep in 5 minutes. I tried it in the dark with my eyes closed, and I felt a very loud noise aimed at me, as if it entered my body, along with a white light that I could see even with my eyes closed. It made me open my eyes immediately, and I let out a loud gasp, and I turned the lights on and couldn't sleep again. So I have no way to fall asleep, and every time that I feel that warning, I have to just get up, even if I've only slept for like an hour. I don't know if anyone feels what I feel, but an important detail is that if I sleep with someone else in the same room, not necessarily the same bed, but none of this ever happens, and I can sleep as long as I want. And right now I feel like I only have 3 choices. Don't sleep, and this is normally what I do, until I just pass out really. Ignore the warning and seeing how far I can go, even if this stuff happens. I am scared though that it could be too strong and I won't be able to handle it. I don't know where the limit is, to be honest. Or sleeping accompanied. I don't want to do this because I don't want to bother my family, but honestly I'm really not sure what to do anymore. Has anyone else ever felt something like this? Do you have any advice on how I can sleep or what this could be that would help a lot? I just really want to feel safe sleeping again. This happened to me when I was really young, somewhere between 3 and 5 years old. I'm not really sure. Back then, 2008 to 2013, my family used to sleep on the floor in the bedroom on the 2nd floor. We couldn't afford proper beds at the time, and it was usually just me, my mother, and my newborn sister in one room. And before my dad passed away, he would usually sleep on the couch in the living room since we didn't have an AC unit back then. We would just leave the doors wide open for the cold air. On this particular night, I randomly woke up out of nowhere. I don't know why, but I just sat up and kind of looked around. Everything was quiet, and it must have been at around 1 or 2 in the morning. The orange glow from our nightlight made everything feel strange and a bit eerie. Then I heard what sounded like slow, faint footsteps or tapping. For some reason, I decided to crawl toward the sound. Maybe I was too young to walk around at night, but I clearly remember crawling on all 4s. I stopped in the middle of the hallway and looked around the living room because I thought that's where the sound was coming from. I saw my father on the couch, maybe asleep, maybe not, I'm not sure, but the room was dim, but I could still make him out. Then I heard the sound again, but now the sound was coming from the sewing room. I turned toward it and crawled all the way up to the doorway, and There was no door back then, just an empty frame, but the second that I reached it, the sound stopped. At that moment, something suddenly felt very wrong. Unlike the hallway or the living room, the sewing room wasn't just dark, it was pitch black, like an empty void. What I mean is that it wasn't just the kind of darkness that you just had to adjust your eyes with. It felt like staring into a wall of just pure blackness, as if the space inside just didn't exist anymore. I couldn't see anything beyond the doorway. I remember just sitting there frozen, staring. I don't know how long I stayed like that, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but at some point, I saw a hand come out of the darkness. It came out of it, and it was the same pitch black as the room itself. I couldn't see where the arm ended. It just extended from the void, the rest lost inside probably, but it didn't grab me, it just held itself out like it was offering, like it wanted me to take it. I didn't move, I just stared at it. Then, just as suddenly, it instantly retreated. My dad came out of the living room, probably to go to the bathroom, and he saw me sitting there. He asked me what I was doing and picked me up, carried me back to the bedroom and shut the door. And that's where the memory ends. I've tried to write it off as a dream, but I remember everything just so vividly. Every touch, the exact words my dad said. It felt so real. I've never had dreams that come even remotely close to this till now. I'm not saying that it was a ghost or a shadow figure or anything specific. I honestly have no idea what it was. And every time that someone brings up strange or paranormal experiences, this memory always comes back clear as day. Had it not have been for my dad, honestly, I don't know what would have happened. I miss that guy, and I hope that he's resting well. This happened in Hungary, summer of 2024. I was at my friend's place for the summer with his stepbrother. Us three are pretty good friends, and almost every night we went out into the woods or just walking past them. We have strange minds that we want to see something strange no matter what, and that's why we were there. Well, one night we actually did. We were going home already. It was pretty late, probably around 11 o'clock or so. We agree on checking one last place and going home after that. We went to the place, and it was an abandoned horse ranch, not far from my friend's house. We saw a random humanoid-like creature on the end of the road. It was full white and glowing, but it didn't light the ground nor trees around it. We wanted to go close to see what it was. We started walking towards it when it suddenly looked like it turned around. It wasn't walking away, it just sort of stood in one place. At that, we panicked and we ran home. At home, we started shouting and yelling at each other because none of us knew what it was, and everybody said different things than the other. But we agreed on going back and finding out what it was to see who was right. The second time we went there, amazingly, we saw it again, because it was still there apparently. This time we went closer, when all of a sudden we heard a dog barking at us, and we ran away. The dog was white like the creature and stood on an empty plain on our right side. And it's really strange too, because we all had the same experience, but we all saw completely different things. Like, I saw the dog, it was big and white, no fence between us nor chain on the dog. My friend didn't see it but heard it bark, and the others saw different things too. The strange part is that, obviously, we run at different speeds. There was like almost 10 meters to 15 meters difference between us, but we all heard it directly behind us, like it was on our heels. And when at the end of the street, we stopped and looked back, the dog, or whatever it was, had disappeared. My guess is that that humanoid thing was a, hallucination sort of image that was projected upon us. But what do you think? What could this creature have actually been? When I was 13 years old, I used to leave the school during lunch break and accompany my friend, as she used to eat her lunch at home, a custom in UK schools, and then come back to school once lunch had ended. I wasn't supposed to eat lunch from home, but managed to trick the teachers, and this was due to being pressured by my friend to join her. Her house was only a 2-minute walk away, and I remember that she had to pass by an alleyway which looked very creepy, and anytime we walked past the alleyway, I would get this sort of unsettling feeling. Well, one day, it was a Friday, and I really didn't want to leave with my friend, but she would peer pressure me all the time. I remember the weather being really bad. It was raining heavily. The sky looked grey and dull, and there was a huge wind outside. I kept telling my friend that we should just stay at school this time, but she insisted that we go to her house. We exited the school gates and walked up the street to head to the alley, which you had to get to the top of the street and then turn left. I was casually walking, and I noticed my friend was no longer beside me. She had this sort of deer-in-the-headlights look and was frozen still. That's when I could see a guy walking towards our direction who was covered all in black, and only his eyes were visible. My friend tapped me on the shoulder to gesture me to turn around, and she started speed walking with me closely behind her. It didn't take us long to get all the way back to school, as we were already near the area, and my friend starts running as we reached the gates and screamed loudly. I freaked out and asked her what was wrong, and she told me that the man was carrying a knife. I remember being visibly freaked out by that, and we told a friend about it, who told us to speak to these teachers, who then called the police. The police took our statements separately while we were both at home, but later stated that we were lying because our answers didn't match up. I don't remember the exact questions, but I remember the wording was confusing. They would ask me how many feet the man was away from us, and would tell me to compare my answer to a bus or a car. They did check the CCTV footage and saw both me and my friend running, but no footage of the man. Years later, I would be somewhat haunted by that incident too. That whole area used to freak me out, and I remember a murder happening in the same area where 2 elderly women were stabbed to death. During my early 20s, I used to do voluntary work at a hospital and once decided to walk into that area to go home. And I felt freaked out, and I decided to not go there ever again. To set the scene, we're a bunch of young girls in high school, year 8. Of course, we've all heard about Ouija boards after watching scary movies, and we all wanted to try it. One afternoon after school, but before we did the board, we went into an abandoned home in our small town. One of the girls said that a local teen had beat the older man to death that had lived there apparently. It was creepy, and I remember feeling like we just shouldn't have been in there. But there we were. And regrettably, I think, we were really rough in there too, picking up random pieces of junk and just throwing it around, just being a bunch of dumb and disrespectful teens. There wasn't any real furniture or belongings, but we were still being jerks, and anyway, we leave, and in an empty paddock just across from the creepy dead man's house, we decided that this was a great spot to summon spirits. What was wrong with us, right? Anyway, I can't remember which one of us made the board, not me, but we 4 sat down in a circle and did all the usual mumbo-jumbo questions. Now, I wish that I could remember exactly what the spirit board said, but I know that I took my hand off the planchette in fear a few times, and so did the others too. Of course, we didn't say goodbye or any of that. We all got freaked out by a spirit named Bob, and that was that. Time went on, and I no longer talked to those childhood friends. Not to do with this spooky stuff, but I can't find out again exactly what they experienced, but I'm also still freaked out about the stuff that started going down and wouldn't know how to even start that conversation, to be honest. But over the next few weeks or so, at least 2 of my friends said that they had really messed up dreams. I then started being woken up at 3 a.m. every night. Bang on 3, I would just wake up and feel really creeped out and look over at the digital clock to see what the time was. I was so scared that I was sleeping with the lights on, but it would still happen. I had started having general anxiety too and bad panic attacks, but I just didn't know what was happening. I thought that I was going mental, but I just kept it all to myself. As it so happens, while all this negative stuff was happening, my parents had recently split and I was in the process of moving interstate with just my mum. My friends had thrown me in a going-away party and invited half the school year. I remember not having a good time at all during the party because of my anxiety, but everyone else was running wild and having a good time, so I suppose it was okay. Pretty late that night, a small group of people came back after going for a walk though, and they had tried messing around with the spirits again. One of my year mates, a guy, was so distressed and he kept saying that he saw a vision of his family dying. So what do a bunch of 14 to 15-year-olds drinking and partying do? Ignore it and carry on. I, for one, was not wanting a bar of that though, and a few weeks later, and it's moving time for myself and my mum. All my furniture was packed up, but because my dad was staying in the house, I just slept on the couch in the lounge room. The weird 3 a.m. wakings up had been still happening, but not every night now. But this last night in the family home was absolutely terrifying. I went to sleep on the couch and it was pitch black in the lounge room. I was dreaming a bunch of nonsense as usual, and in the dream, I was in our backyard near the clothesline. I remember seeing some friends and family members, and then all of a sudden they all dropped to the ground like they died. I then heard my name being called, clear as day, but it was some weird, twisted voice. I woke up in the dead of night, and it was darkness all around. I looked around the darkness, and then I looked down to the foot of the couch, and there, standing there, was a dark and big manly figure, just looking over me. I distinctly remember knowing someone was there, and I sort of weakly called out, "Dad." There was no answer. At this point, I tried to look for some eyes or a face or something, but all I could see were these red-looking eyes. And I know that they were a faded color, but red-colored eyes were definitely there staring at me. Think of any time you've woken up in the dark and tried to find whoever was disturbing you. You can sort of see them and know that they're there, but it's not super clear, right? Whatever or whoever was there, they were a bad presence. Well, then, I think I did what any other kid would do and put the blankets over my head and tried to breathe quietly. I was wishing whatever it was to just go away and everything would be okay. I couldn't tell you how long I was under the covers for and trying to breathe from a tiny part that I made in the covers, but I somehow fell asleep for a tiny bit when the sun started to rise again until my mum woke me up. Of course, I didn't tell my mum or anyone what had happened. It was such a surreal thing to experience as a 14-year-old going through all the other hormonal and high school stuff that I just moved to the other state, tried to integrate into school and put it all in the back of my mind. But I just knew that bad juju was going to stay back at the old family house, now my dad's place. Over the next year and a half, a lot of changes happened with family, and I did end up living back at that house, studying a diploma in music that I could only do in Sydney. There was only one more incident not long after I moved back in, but man, was it scary. I was home alone and I was sitting at the computer desk. It was situated behind a wall, and if you looked through the doorway just to the right of the desk, you could see the kitchen and the small living area. I was messing about on MSN Messenger at the time, and then felt a sudden shot of unease come over me. Then I heard a loud bang like someone had slammed the oven door shut, but so loud, and even the lights flickered a bit. It was just the yuckiest, scariest feeling that I'd ever had. I jumped up and looked into the kitchen, and I couldn't see anything. I then ran out the back door and grabbed the cordless landline on my way out, and called my dad. I would have sounded mad to him, I know, but all I could say was something was weird in the house and please come home.